We are live on Proline TV, the Our Lads Football Network. Thanks for tuning in as we talk NC State football. And anytime we get the opportunity to talk about the Wolfpack, Cory Smith from Pack Pride 247 Sports joins us. How's it going, Cory?
I'm doing well. Hope you are, Greg.
I'm doing all right. It's kind of fun. I mean, it's always fun to talk to you at this time of year because this means that we're almost there. I know it's a little earlier than normal, but I figured, hey, this is probably the perfect time to do it because it's probably the deadest time of year, really, for sports in general. So
yeah, especially for football. I mean, we cover everything over Pack Pride, so we're kind of in the heat of like basketball stuff right now because they'll be having a live period here coming up soon. But yeah, as far as football stuff is concerned, yeah, it's slow right now, but still some recruiting stuff going on, and we're kind of ramping up, so it's a perfect time to talk about it.
Yeah, and again, if anybody is whether it's basketball or football, you can check the links in the description of this video, and that's where you can find out that everything that Cory covers for NC State sports, basketball, football, of course, the big ones, and North Carolina State football. Will be trying to get back going in the right direction after, I guess it was their worst record since 2019. The last time they finished with a sub 500 record. Dorn is in now his 13th year. Let's start with Dave Dorn. Anytime you're in your 13th year and you're in one of these types of programs, that's not always a title contender every year, and you've been around this long, people do start to wonder when you have that bad year, is there any time now that the people in charge are saying, maybe we just need a new voice, maybe we just need a new direction? Is any of that going on, or is Dave Dorn safe and he's in good standing?
Yeah, there's definitely some, hot seat conversation going on, especially given, the way, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but kind of the way this offseason went, where you lose some key players to the portal. If you're retaining those players and it's clear that, the team and the players involved all want to see this thing turned around, then it's a little different than, where things stand right now this offseason. They've been able to retain several key players, obviously CJ Bailey, Hollywood Smothers, Justin Jolie, Noah Rogers, that we'll talk about in a second. All those guys, you get back, but there's questions about, last year was supposed to be the year. And they built that roster. We talked about it last offseason. They built that roster with Grayson McCall and all those players that I just talked about on the offensive side of the football, along with several key offensive linemen, guys on the defensive side of the football they felt really good about. Obviously they lose a guy like Peyton Wilson from the previous year, but last year was supposed to be the year. And, obviously injuries to Grayson McCall certainly hurt. Caden Fordham, who was a key guy for in the middle of that defense last year, was somebody that they expected to be a guy last year. And obviously for him to go down with an injury, I believe it was 5 or 6 games into last season, that significantly hurt what you're trying to do and trying to build towards. But they lost some games where they shouldn't have lost. And when you do that, it raises questions, it raises eyebrows. And then this season, the schedule is more difficult than it was last year. And the guys that you're returning aren't as experienced, are guys that you feel really good about talent-wise, but you don't have that element of experience that you felt last year. So I think right now there is still some, a little bit of hot seat conversation going on. I'm not going to say like, if they go 8-4 or 9-3, then he's still going to be out. But if they end up with a losing record this year, there's going to be some very big questions about whether or not Dave Dorn sticks around.
Yeah, the one thing that I noticed, and we talked a little bit about it last year, is that the depth on the front lines on defense, especially, it seemed to be Dave's strength in recruiting over the years. I mean, man, as you know, just some really awesome talent that he would recruit, and every couple of years you'd see a new wave. And we haven't seen that wave over the last couple of years. That's a little bit concerning. I don't know if that's just the way things are now. It's a lot more difficult. I don't know. But do you notice anything in particular with the recruiting that has it been the same, or has the program been suffering just a little bit?
Yeah, it's taken a step back in terms of, the overall recruiting that they've been able to get, especially in state. And it's not just NC State. UNC has lost several recruits despite getting Bill Belichick. They've lost several recruits to out-of-state programs. But I think part of it, specifically you talked about the defensive line. Part of the issue for NC State along the defensive line has been the fact that they've been running a 3-3-5 scheme. So when you're running that type of scheme and you have a 3-3 stack, defensive linemen know I'm just going to be a body up front to be able to block and try to force the issue and try to allow for linebackers to be able to blitz. That's not what every defensive lineman wants to do. You want to be able to get after the quarterback. And so you're missing out on some of those guys they have over the previous years. Now they're talking about potentially moving to a different scheme. So they might be moving to a 3-4. And that's something that we'll get into, I'm sure, in just a second. I know you had on the list to talk about some scheme changes, things along those lines. But that may be something that happens here coming up pretty soon, with a little bit of a 3-4, but also probably going to a little bit more of a 4-down lineman, at least at the very least having a stand-up edge rusher on the outside.
Well, have there been any key changes as far as coaching, first of all?
Yeah, so they let go from last season of Robert and the previous offensive coordinator, and then Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator from last season, obviously left and took the job at Marshall. So they had to make two major changes there. On the offensive side of the football, they promoted Kurt Roper, who has been a previous offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for a couple of years with Duke, then went to South Carolina. Things didn't work out for him necessarily on his first couple times as an offensive coordinator, but he has the trust of CJ Bailey, your current quarterback. They promoted him to that position for him to have another chance at being the guy. The way Dave Doran likes to say it is he's got offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. They both have a chip on their shoulder, as he likes to say. He loves to talk about himself with a chip on his shoulder as well.
Okay.
DJ Elliott is who's now taking over as the defensive coordinator for NC State. There was some thought that they may promote from within, but they went out. They got a guy who specializes in linebacker growth. He was a guy that was previously with Temple before he went over to the Philadelphia Eagles a couple years ago, was the linebackers coach with the Philadelphia Eagles. He comes back to the college level after a year off and taking over for NC State. I think one of the big things they'd love to do right now is be able to say we're going to go to a 4-3 hybrid 3-4 where you kind of you use that stand-up defensive lineman as an edge rusher. But part of the issue right now is they've had to use this offseason to really recruit towards that type of player. They went out and got a couple guys that they feel good about as those potential stand-up defensive linemen. But is it enough to change your base from a 3-3-5 now to a 4-3 or kind of hybrid 3-4?
Interesting. So what you're saying is their new defensive coordinator was a linebacker coach with the Eagles in their Super Bowl season, which is always nice. That's a nice selling point.
Well, the previous year, yeah. He
wasn't
there for the Super Bowl season.
Okay, so he was there previous year. Okay, so he was with Temple last year.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, he's at Temple, and then 2 years ago, he was with the Eagles, and then last year, he took the year off.
A year off. Okay.
Yep.
Does that explain why there's a couple of key guys coming in from Temple then?
Yes.
Okay.
So you got
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Jamel Johnson, Trey Thomas, both coming over from Temple. Two guys that he previously coached there. So yeah, he gets two guys that know his system pretty well.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that's a lot of changing, and whether or not it'll work, I guess we'll find out. Maybe if things go well, the whole chip on your shoulder thing will be prophetic. Or who knows, maybe everybody gets canned and it's just a complete catastrophe. But this is college football. It's the new era of college football. Anything can happen, especially if you have a talented quarterback, which we'll get into in just a little while. And that's definitely where NC State is going to be interesting this year. Okay, so speaking of some of those transfers, then why don't we start there? So what would you consider the two biggest? We'll start on defense because right now it looks like on our depth chart at our lads, we've got Trey Thomas and JJ Johnson as potential starters. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I think so. And, one of the things that they did this offseason too is they went out and added some more depth in the spring during that spring window. So you guys have them listed there. Trey Thomas, I think, is probably the guy who's going to be the starter there. Another one to know, and whether or not he starts at the strong side linebacker position or he's, moved to that kind of another defensive end spot remains to be seen. That's something that, Dave Doran hasn't given a clear indication on just yet. So we'll just make that a little bit easier. But another guy that's right behind him, Cian Sloan, that comes over from, out of the transfer portal as well. A guy that comes over from Utah State. He was with Utah State, the same place that Teague Anderson comes over from, who's the offensive tackle that's probably going to be starting at right tackle opposite Jacarius Peak, who was a starter last year. So, again, those two guys I would probably say are two of the bigger ones based off of what I've heard. But, man, as far as what you absolutely needed, they really, really utilized the spring window to go out and add guys that they absolutely needed. Another one that you guys – I'm trying to look on the list and make sure that we've got him. J.J. Johnson, obviously, at the safety position. But at the cornerback position, Jamel Johnson was a big one that came in. But we might need to add on there. I'm trying to look for him. Brian Nelson was one that came over from – again, this is all the difficulty of the spring window.
Sure.
Brian Nelson was one of the biggest additions for them this offseason. Comes over from North Texas, was a guy that, I believe we had him rated as one of the top safeties available in the spring window. So he comes over and again, it was a major need because they lost several that, could have been big fills for NC State this season. Tamarcus Cooley, Brandon Cisse, two guys that entered the transfer portal and were immediate 4-star guys that went to SEC programs. So you lose guys like that. You have to go out and go get talent. Jaron Sensabaugh, you mentioned, you guys have him listed there at the cornerback position. I think he's one that I'm kind of looking for to see, can he compete at that cornerback spot and kind of push Devon Marshall or Jamel Johnson for one of those spots. So there's a lot of different guys they've added this offseason. You see a whole lot of yellow there on the list. That's kind of what they did in the spring window, was really go out and add a ton of what they feel like is potential talent to fill those roles, and guys like Kenny Soares from Northwestern, Sebastian Harsh, that was an all Mountain West Conference player last year coming over from Wyoming. They just went out and got a whole bunch of guys they feel like can fill those spots and if necessary, be depth pieces too.
So Harsh was what was he? He was an all-conference edge rusher for Wyoming, Harsh?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good. And then you mentioned what is it? Stone? No, Sion. Who is it? How do you? What is it?
Sloan. Yep.
Oh, it is Sloan. Okay,
yes.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So Sloan had 7.5 sacks. So a couple of guys from the Mountain West. So that's pretty good. I also noticed that there was, let's see, another kid from Texas Tech was on there too. I don't see him on here though. I guess he's not a big enough transfer. The kid Harsh, is that? Well, there he is, Sebastian Harsh. Okay, good. Okay. No, not Harsh. That wasn't the one. I was from Wyoming. I'm thinking of the kid
Joseph
from Texas Tech. Yes, Joseph.
Joseph Adedire.
Okay.
Comes over. He's another edge rusher, and I mentioned it. The fact that you absolutely needed as many edge rushers.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that's a lot.
He was another late addition. Yeah, a lot of these guys were the very end of that transfer portal window. So, yeah, look, depth charts all over the place need updating. So I don't blame you guys for not having them just yet.
No, that's part of the reason why we love these conversations. So you definitely believe that Adedire, obviously you've got Harsh, we've got Sloan. But you think, but definitely Nelson. Now, Nelson is not only on the depth chart, but do you think right now he should be considered a starter?
I think him and Devon Marshall are probably your starters right now. Jackson Vick, you guys have listed, along with Jamel Johnson, I think are two guys that are going to be in that rotation as well. And again, like I said, I think Jaron Sensabaugh is another name to watch. I'm interested to see what happens with Javon Bailey, though, because he's another guy that they really liked coming out of high school, whether or not he ends up kind of pushing for one of those spots and is potentially that kind of third guy in either one of those rotations to come in. You obviously need as much depth as you can get, as NC State has learned over the last several years with, cornerback injuries. But those are definitely guys that I feel like are, probably at the top of the depth chart, if not pushing for one of those spots.
Okay, so a lot going on there on defense then with the transfers, and not a lot, at least it's early, but those are some of the top freshmen that we have as far as the defense is concerned. Are there any are there any true freshmen on defense that you think will have a chance for a significant role or at least a contribution?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I think a lot of the way that they kind of went about last year was to be able to build depth at those spots. I don't know that there's necessarily anybody that I would say like they're coming in and they're just going to have an immediate impact for NC State. But I mean, yeah, I think the biggest thing right now was the fact that they really needed to go get good depth. I mean, if I had to pick somebody, as far as the potential defensive impact right now, I'd probably, a lot of it was built about, trying to get guys that are, on the offensive side of the football last year. But and maybe I'm cheating a little bit here, but AJ Prim, a guy from Pearl River, he's a JUCO transfer, so he's not necessarily a freshman, but he was in this last year's class. He's somebody that they really liked coming out of the JUCO ranks.
Okay.
But again, he was recruited to the previous system. He was recruited to a 3-3-5. Is he a guy that they feel like can be an edge rusher, somebody that can really make that impact? I think he probably fits this scheme better than some that they recruited last year, because he is a guy that's 6'3", 255 pounds. He's not that, stocky defensive end that they had been going after previously. He's more of an edge rusher, more of a guy that wants to get after the quarterback. So I feel like he probably fits into this scheme a little bit better than some.
Okay. Offensively, again, we mentioned a couple of those guys, Grant and Anderson up front on the offensive line. So you got those two guys that, do you believe they are locked in as starters?
Probably to start the season. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe, because of the fact that right now, the only position in question really going into the season was, really kind of that right guard spot. I think Anthony Carter is entrenched there at the left guard. I think Chakarius Peak, as we talked about, left tackle. The center position, at least going into the year, I think I'd give the edge to Jalen Grant. Brock Stooks potentially competing there, but we'll see whether or not he's at the guard or the center position. He's played both at the college level. And then, like I said, Teague Anderson, I think, is the guy there at the right tackle spot, just because of the fact that they recruited him to come over. He's a multi-year starter at Utah State, and they really like what he brings to the system. The one question, obviously, like I said, right guard position, Val Erickson. I like where you guys have him listed right now. I wouldn't be surprised if Kamen Smith overtakes him and potentially take that spot in the fall. We heard a lot about him, not necessarily in the spring this year, just because of the fact that the spring was closed. But we heard a lot about him from a development standpoint last year as a sophomore, a redshirt freshman last year, I guess you could say. So him coming into what would be his third year at NC State, I think he has a chance to kind of push for that spot as well. And another one, too, he's a true freshman, so that's why I don't think he's going to start the year at the center spot, but I would not be surprised if he pushes for that throughout the year. And Spike Souls, he is one of the first offensive linemen that NC State has gotten that is a true 4-star coming into this system. He is the highest ranked player, first top 100 player in the 24/7 Sports rankings that Dave Doran has gotten throughout his tenure. So that tells you just how highly we think of him.
Okay.
But we've heard throughout the process, they think that he could probably push for that spot too.
Okay. And it's possible too that couldn't it be like the loser gets the right guard spot?
Potentially.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
possible. Okay.
Again, but I think Spike Souls is somebody that the
long-term center.
He is somebody they feel like is the center for the future for NC State.
Okay. Also on offense, so we don't, let's see, as far as the transfers, we named them on offense. We already talked about Souls. So there are two guys at the freshman receivers, Hoffman and Boulder. Who do you think has the biggest upside there? And do you think either one of them have a chance for reps this year?
Yeah, I think Boulder probably has the higher upside from that standpoint, just, based off of having a chance to see him over the past couple of years. Hoffman is more of a fit at the slot position. So I like where you guys have him listed. I think him, Terrell Anderson, Jonathan Paler, probably all pushing each other. Terrell Boulder is another guy that can fit into that slot as well. But I do think Hoffman probably has a bigger chance to make an impact this upcoming year. for the reason that, they lose Kevin Concepcion this past offseason. That was one of the biggest losses for them. He goes to Texas A&M, and they need somebody at that spot. Everything we heard in the spring, there wasn't a whole lot of buzz coming out of the spring, but the biggest buzz that we heard on the offensive side of the football, especially for freshmen, was Teddy Hoffman, based off of what he was able to come in, the way he was able to compete, and the maturity that he showed on the field. I think really kind of boosted his chances. Jarrell Boulder, I would probably put, if I had to shift things a little bit here, and this is just, looking at the way you guys have the depth chart here, I might shift Jarrell Boulder down or, over into that kind of player 2 spot there at the Z position.
Ahead of Locklear.
Yeah, move Locklear back. And then Jonathan Paylor, I might move Terrell Anderson even, or actually, I might move Terrell Anderson into the player 2 Z spot just because I think Terrell Anderson is going to play much more on the outside than he is a slot, and then probably put Bolger down there and along with Paylor and Hoffman.
Okay, so you would actually then have. So who do you think? Oh, so who do you think would be the starting slot?
I honestly, right now, I think it's a 3-way battle between Boulder, Hoffman, and Jonathan Paylor. Jonathan Paylor is somebody they've put a lot of stock into, and they really love. They would love to see him be able to fill that spot. It's just, he's got some work to do this fall to be able to kind of push for that spot. Teddy Hoffman, the thing we heard about him throughout the spring was he just had reliable hands. I mean, every time and that's what you need in the slot position receiver. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Paylor play a little bit more of a gadget play type guy, be that slot / running back, be able to kind of move around in this system. That's what they recruited him to be. So there's a lot of fluidity across those slot receivers is what I'm trying to say right now.
And speaking of Concepcion, so obviously that is the biggest loss for the program, maybe one of the biggest in years at the transfer spot. Was that just simply money, or was that he wasn't happy with his role, his production dropped tremendously, and he just wanted out? What was the main reason why NC State wasn't able to keep him?
Yeah, I would say a large part of it was money. The monetary side of things. I mean, when a player goes to Texas A&M, you can kind of imagine that it probably had something to do with money.
Texas A&M. Yeah.
But, at the same time, I think there was some frustration last year with the way that he was utilized. And I think there was some frustration on the NC State side of things that the way that they utilized him, he didn't have more of an impact. They just constantly fed him the ball last season. He led NC State by far in terms of targets, in terms of receptions, but was nowhere near what Justin Jolie put up in terms of yards. So that's where your expectation was he's going to be the guy. And, they paid him handsomely the previous year, but, in terms of bringing him back, I think it was a mutual decision that, all right, if you're looking for more money based off of what you did this past year for us, it's probably going to need to come elsewhere. So that's kind of the things that ended up. Yeah.
And the last guy to talk about, freshman, is the quarterback. Anytime you have a quarterback that is decently ranked, like Will Wilson is, they have a very young quarterback room there, I see. We know CJ Bailey he had his growth last year as a freshman, so there's a lot of hope there. But Wilson, how does he fit in with this room? Is Bailey clearly ahead of these guys? And as long as Bailey's here, he's going to be the starter, you think? Or does either of these other guys, Wilson or Thomas, have a chance to beat out Bailey in the next year or two?
Yeah, Wilson is clear. I mean, I say Wilson, sorry. Bailey is clearly the guy here for NC State. Going into the season, they had they have really high expectations for him based off of the way that he finished last season. I think a lot of people kind of point to the 10 interceptions, but a lot of those were mistakes that he had early on in the season. As he was kind of going through those growing pains, he did have 3 interceptions against Georgia Tech on the road. That was just kind of a weird game for him overall, but he was the guy down the stretch for NC State, and the expectation going into this year is that he'll continue to be the guy for them. They'd love to have him for the next 2 seasons and potentially send him off to the NFL. If that ends up being the case, he is a guy that has all the measurables, all the intangibles that you ask for in an NFL quarterback. He's got a big arm. He's a guy that can run the football, can pass the football really well, completed almost 65% of his passes last season. So he's a guy that they feel like can be the guy for the next couple of years to come for NC State. Will Wilson, I think, is probably a guy that is competing right now with Lex Thomas to be the backup for this team. And again, like you said, both of these guys very young. Lex Thomas has actually been around the program for longer than CJ Bailey, but he went through a serious injury his last year of high school. So he's not at that stage yet where he's really competing to be the guy, or he wasn't competing at that stage last year. So this year he's trying to push to still be the number 2 guy for this team, along with Will Wilson. What we love about Will Wilson and why we had him, as a high 3-star in our rankings last year was not just the way that he can pass the football and the strength that he has in the pocket, but also his willingness to roll out of the pocket, make a difference with his legs. And that was something that was, very, very, coveted by Kurt Roper when he was recruiting him. Took a look at him, and CJ Bailey has a similar style, but they're very, very different types of quarterbacks. One is like Will Wilson, I believe, is 6'2", 6'3", just a big body quarterback. Whereas, CJ Bailey, 6'6", like wiry, but is willing to run the football, has no issues with running outside of the pocket as well. But that's kind of, that's where you want your quarterbacks to be is having guys that have that willingness to run the football for you too in the system.
Is there any talk about trying to put on some more muscle, some more poundage for Bailey? Because when you're that big, 6'6", 210, like you said, wiry, that ain't gonna work out in the NFL usually. So probably another 10 or 15 pounds wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, there was talk earlier in the offseason. I haven't been able to confirm it yet. But as of right now, the expectation going into the year was to add about 15 to 20 pounds of muscle this offseason and really have him ready to be a guy that can take on the full load for NC State this upcoming year, something he didn't have to do last year and didn't have the expectation of doing last year up until coming into this year. So, yeah, that's definitely something they've been focused on.
Okay, let's now go over players that have been in the program that are ready to maybe take that next step. You've already mentioned a few of them who are actually pretty young. Starting on offense here, you mentioned Hollywood Smothers, who ended up as a leading rusher for the program last year, even though he was just a freshman, which was pretty impressive. The 6.4 average is what stuck out to me because he only ran for 571 yards, but he also had almost 20 receptions, which was nice. So, yeah, as far as the ground game is concerned, what's the outlook of Smothers? What kind of a running back do you think he could be? Do you see anything like much better than that? Do you see as this is a player that could be all conference at one point? Or do you just think that, he's just, a pretty good player and he'll be fine for the time being?
Yeah, I definitely think he has all conference potential written all over him. Obviously, there's some very good running backs coming back this year in the ACC, and several teams have gone out and added talent at that position. But Hollywood Smothers, I think, has a chance to be a top 2 or 3 running back in the ACC this upcoming season.
Wow. Okay.
Based not only on what he can do from a running back standpoint in terms of running the football, but also his pass catching ability. As you mentioned, over 20 receptions last season for him out of the backfield. I think he has, and that was him starting the season as the number 3 guy. Last year, the expectation going into the year was that they had, some depth at that position. And then Hollywood Smothers ended up emerging as the top guy in this system. They ended up having another transfer. Kendrick Raphael left the team in the spring. And a lot of that, I think, had to do with the fact that he realized, I'm not going to be the lead guy in the system. Probably not going to have a chance to be the number 2 guy in the system because Jaden Duke Scott, who happened to be right behind Hollywood Smothers, a redshirt freshman going this year, I think has a chance to be a great change of pace type back this upcoming year. So he'll be somebody to watch for as well. Heard a lot of great things about him back in the spring, pushing for that spot. And then, like I said, Hollywood Smothers is somebody that coming out of the spring had heard, a lot of coaches basically say, we don't feel like we're going to have him beyond this year. And that's because they feel like he's going to go to the NFL after this upcoming year. And that would be his 3rd year. He would only be a guy that, is going after taking a red shirt at Oklahoma and then playing last year for NC State. They feel like he has NFL potential written all over him as well. So he'll be somebody to watch in terms of a guy that really has some motivation to have a breakout year and what he feels like is his money year and a chance for him to go to the NFL next season.
So that's a really young but talented backfield then with Bailey and Smothers. Probably at that point shows you that there is some hope this season. Because anytime you can have that type of a backfield, young, getting better, going to improve, going to break out. Maybe I'll get to the breakouts a little bit later. Maybe both of those guys will be ahead of the list. But yeah, that shows you that NC State might be an interesting sleeper team to keep an eye on. But because you look at the rest of the skill position players, and then the key guys are the veterans: Justin Jolly, Noah Rogers, Wesley Grimes. So they're in pretty good shape there, especially Jolly. I mean, Jolly's got some numbers you don't see at tight end.
Yeah, Jolie is somebody that going into this upcoming year, they feel like is definitely.
You pronounce his name Julie?
Jolie.
Okay, yep. Jolie. So
like
basically, it's pronounced like Jollie or something like that.
Yes,
okay.
Kind of like
Jolie.
Just take the N off, and it's the old Dolly Parton song. So
okay.
So instead of Jolene, it's Jolie. Yeah, but Justin Jolie is somebody that going into last offseason, we talked a lot about his potential and what he could be coming over from UConn, and he proved it. On the field, didn't get as many targets as I know a lot of NC State fans would have loved to see. They want to see him get 5+ every single game. But what we saw down the stretch last season was him and CJ Bailey really develop a relationship. Usually you see freshman quarterbacks develop a relationship with a slot receiver or a tight end. He tried to feed Kevin Concepcion a lot, and that didn't end up leading to big gains. But he would hit Justin Jolie down the seam almost every single game for, at least a 25, 30-yard gain that basically completely flips the field for them. And their expectation is that he'll be able to do that again this season. The previous year, he led the country in terms of tight ends in broken tackles. And that was also with Brock Bowers previously, back when he was in college. So Brock Bowers was number 2 behind him the previous season, according to Pro Football Focus. So like those types of things, when you're looking at what can be, attainable and what types of things he can do at the NFL level, Justin Jolie has that written all over him. And then, you talked about the veterans for this team. Wesley Grimes, a kid that last year I thought came on pretty well again, along with CJ Bailey kind of taking over that role. And then Noah Rogers, I talked about Justin Jolie's big play potential. Noah Rogers is another guy that has some serious big play potential. He's a home run hitting type of wide receiver. Previously a top 50 overall wide receiver in his class back in 2023. Initially went to Ohio State for his first year and then transferred out, comes back home, goes to NC State last year as a redshirt freshman. So he's going into what could also be a really big year for him. I think Hollywood Smothers proved it a little bit more last season in terms of what his potential could be. But Noah Rogers still has a lot of untapped potential that he hasn't been able to show yet.
Wow, that just shows you that between Rogers and Jolie and Smothers and Bailey, that this has got potential. This offense really does have potential to be one of the best offenses in the conference. And a lot's going to depend on that line. How and you mentioned how some of the new guys might mix with some of the others, but is Pete considered the top lineman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what kind of?
Yeah, he was a guy that last season actually ended up grading out as one of the best pass blocking tackles and one of the best run blocking tackles in the ACC last season. I believe he finished. The only guy that finished above him on NC State's roster was Anthony Belton in terms of pass rush, but he led NC State last season when it comes to run blocking, and that comes to the tackle position. So it's not like he was having to do a ton of run blocking, at the guard spot and trying to limit defensive tackles. He was a guy on the outside that was clearing the way for guys like Hollywood Smothers to be able to get those big gains as well.
All right. So offensively, those are some of the guys to keep an eye on. What about defensively? Who would be the key holdovers?
Yeah, the key holdovers there at nose tackle and potentially just defensive tackle. We'll see whether or not he plays in a 4-down lineman system or not. Either way, Brandon Cleveland is the guy to know when it comes to what NC State wants to do in the trenches. He's somebody that over the past couple of years has really developed in this system and become, a leader for this team as well. The only guy, a lot of times NC State kind of goes after, undersized guys that are able to kind of fill those gaps. He's 6'4", 320 pounds, and can really clog up the middle for what they want to do. Another guy that I would point out too, and maybe push him into the starting spot there at the left defensive end spot, is Isaiah Shirley. Just based off of what he was able to do at the end of last season, really kind of pushed for that spot. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him be the guy there going into the season. Trevally Price is somebody they really need to step up. Didn't get a ton from him last season. So if they're gonna continue with those two as your defensive ends and just have a stand-up edge rusher alongside of them, they really need those guys to step up from a pass rushing standpoint. The other guy to know here, Sean Brown for NC State at the linebacker position. He was somebody that led NC State in terms of tackles last season. The biggest thing for him is he's got to cut down on missed tackles. He led NC State in missed tackles last season with over 30. So it's something that was a really big weakness for him last season. So that needs to be upped a little bit this season for him, and that needs to be the focus for him going into fall camp. And then, Caden Fordham, I mentioned him earlier, started off the season really well, was actually leading, I believe, if I remember correctly, the ACC in tackles before his injury, despite missing almost an entire game in the season opener. But he's somebody that can show some growth this season too. And if he can do that, if he can be a guy that can step up, I feel good about this linebacker position. But it's pretty clear that they needed some depth. They went out and got A.J. Richardson. They went out and got Cian Sloan. They went out and got Kenny Soares. And then Sebastian Harsh is kind of that kind of hybrid guy along with Trey Thomas. Are those guys going to be stand-up defensive ends? Are they going to be actual linebackers? So they all have potential there. I mentioned Devon Marshall earlier. I mentioned J.J. Johnson as far as guys that, in that secondary. But the big one to know that I think has a chance to really step up here is Ronnie Royal at that nickelback spot. He's somebody that NC State loved, was from the state of Alabama, was overlooked by Auburn, Alabama, despite going on visits there. He got overlooked despite being a high 4-star guy in our rankings. He's just undersized, and I think that's why he fits perfectly into this nickel spot. Now, does the starting nickel get on the field on the starting snap? I don't know. We'll see. But if they stick to a 3-3-5 at the beginning of the year, that fifth spot, that fifth cornerback spot for NC State, or fifth DB, whatever you want to call him, is going to be that nickelback. So Ronnie Royal, if they have the starting nickel out there, he's going to be the guy for NC State going into this year, along with Isaiah Crowell, who was able to play well there last season too.
Okay, so give me then your top breakout players for this year. And again, I'm sure we've already touched on some of them. So give me like a one or two for each side of the ball.
All right, so on the offensive side of the football, I would definitely go with Noah Rogers. I guess you could throw Hollywood Smothers in there, but I think based off of what Hollywood Smothers did last season at the end of last year, and the fact that he averaged almost 8 yards per touch last season, people know who he is. They've seen the elusiveness. He was one of the best guys in terms of missed tackle rate last season. So I can't necessarily put him as a breakout. If I had to pick two guys, I'm going to go with Noah Rogers based off of his big play ability. And another guy I'll go with, I don't know. Like, I love Terrell Anderson. I love his potential. But I don't know if the targets are going to be there as much because of Justin Joly and Noah Rogers for him to get that spot. I'm going to go with Jaden Scott, Duke Scott, because NC State, as much as they love Hollywood Smothers and what he's going to do, and he's going to be the lead back, I'm going to put Duke Scott as a breakout potential because he is a guy they really loved last spring when he came in. They loved him last fall, but just felt like given the depth, they could save him and give him a red shirt and have him build another year. Based off of everything I heard in the spring, like, he's going to be a really elusive and dynamic backup back for them in this system. And I don't think there's going to be a ton of drop off with Hollywood Smothers, which is going to say a lot because I just talked about the NFL potential for Hollywood Smothers. Duke Scott is just an undersized guy that a lot of people kind of missed out on in the state of Georgia. And I think he's somebody that coming into NC State this upcoming year has a lot to prove and has a chance to really kind of push for that number one spot.
Okay.
For the following year, not necessarily this year. And then on the defensive side of the football, breakouts, are we categorizing breakouts as guys that, didn't have good seasons last year and have a chance to have them this year, or transfers that are coming in too?
You can stay away from transfers.
Okay.
Unless of course you think the transfer coming in didn't really, produce much at his other location. We can throw him in there.
One guy that I'll go ahead and say Ronnie Royal again. I just talked about, the potential that he has there and being that starting nickel for NC State and the obvious need that they have there. Just heard a ton of good things about him back in the spring. I'm going to go with a guy at the, I'll stick with somebody from last year's roster, and I'll say Jackson Vick, just based off of, I know Jamel Johnson's probably going to start there. And obviously, the opposite, or not Jamel Johnson, but we talked about Brian Nelson probably starting there. And then Devon Marshall being the guy at the other starting spot. But Jackson Vick was somebody last year that, every single time that Dave Doran got a chance to talk about him, he talked glowingly about what he did on the practice field, how he's pushing for that spot last season. So I just feel like another guy that has a chance to really kind of push for a starting spot for the following season and be heavily in the rotation this year is probably going to be Jackson Vick.
Okay. So you'll stick with the secondary couple of players. Okay.
Well,
by the way,
another big reason there was quite a few transfers that left the program, so they have a lot more opportunity. But I think those two guys really will kind of take advantage of those opportunities.
Who do you think is going to lead the team in sacks? Do you think they'll have one of those guys that'll be a clear? I know Van was a big loss last year, so will there be somebody that could clearly lead the team in sacks?
I don't know, because going into the fall, it's funny because you one of the questions that you had on here was talking about storylines from spring practice. One of the things I was going to mention was one of the storylines we realized was they really needed depth across the middle. They went out. I mean, you look at all the yellow, Sebastian Harsh, Kenny Soares, Trey Thomas, Cian Sloan. Actually, Trey Thomas was in the fall, but Cian Sloan, all three of those guys were all added in the spring portal window. So after you got through with spring camp, they knew they needed those guys. If I had to pick two guys right now that I think have a chance to push for that, I would probably say Trey Thomas and Cian Sloan. But Sebastian Harsh is another guy that I think, based off of what we heard from the summer conditioning and what we've heard from, guys that what they feel about him this upcoming season, I think it's going to be one of those guys that's really going to push for this. But I wouldn't be surprised if Trevally Price is another guy that really kind of pushes for that as well. But I just feel like it's going to be one of those stand-up, edge rushers for NC State that they're going to kind of slot down in those spots.
You mentioned Fordham. So he was out for most of the year last year?
Yes, he missed the final 7 games of the season due to I can't remember if it was a torn ACL, but the injury that he sustained, he was able to recover from. Okay. Didn't go through spring practice, but I've been told is fully cleared going into this upcoming season, and is able to work out with the team now. Should be able to go through fall camp fully as well.
Okay. So lastly, I want to go over just the beginning of not only the season with the kickoff game, first day, I believe, of the week 0 season, August 28th, when they get to take on East Carolina again after the bowl loss. So maybe that's a good thing for NC State fans. They get a little instant payback. They're a 12.5-point favorite in the game after they were a 7-point favorite in the bowl and lost in that one. And they've been going through a bowl drought. That also can't be very good for Dave Doran, huh?
No, I mean, look, he tries not to put a whole lot of stock in it and says, sure, we have our players sit out and things like that, for those games. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for things that you're going to be upset with Dave Doran about, that's probably going to be one that you're going to point out as well.
Okay, so what do you think about that opener? Because I see East Carolina has a lot of new players, and maybe that's the reason why they're a 12.5-point favorite, because I don't think anybody knows what to expect.
Yeah, look, for NC State going into that one, that is definitely one that they absolutely need to win. You can't afford to lose 2 straight to ECU. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a rivalry per se, because it's not a game where they constantly play it, nearly enough for you to call it that. But it is one where, look, there's some bad blood. I mean, early on in Dave Doran's tenure, he lost a couple games to them. After they won a game, I believe it was in I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2020, like something like that. I think it was 2020, actually. It was a weird cycle. And, Dave Doran said at the time, like, I've seen, a lot of ECU fans coming up to me with the hook and, kind of throwing it in my face. And he said famously, like, I wanted to snap that off. And they beat them by, multiple touchdowns in that game. I want to say they beat the brakes off them 2 straight games. And, because they ended the 2020 season with one against them and then came into the next season against them. So very similar to this situation. But, ECU was a surprise team last year. They fired their head coach. They retained the interim coach based off of what he was able to do at the end of last season. But they lost a lot of talent in terms of their backfield this past season, in terms of wide receiver position this past season, and on the defensive side of the football. They keep their quarterback. They have, several pieces back from last season, including Anthony Smith, who's a former NC State wide receiver who transferred over there. So he, I believe, if I remember correctly, was one of their lead wide receivers last season. I can't remember if he led them in yards, but he was a big play wide receiver for them last year. So there will be a little bit of bad blood there. But again, this is 100% a game that NC State feels it can win and feels it should win going into the season.
Yeah, especially the first game of the season. NC State's going to have, even though they have a lot of turnover too, but they've got a lot more coming back and home and payback. Yeah, you can understand why they should be the double-digit favorite there. National championship is not going to happen. We know that. They're 50-1 to win the ACC, so that's a big number. It seems like just a year or two ago they were probably 10-1 or somewhere in that range. That's the usual number. So to be 50-1 is a little bit surprising. They're co-10th choice right now as far as Vegas is concerned with Pitt, and the over/under total 6.5. So the under is 6.5 minus 150. The over is plus 125. So it's actually, believe it or not, it's actually leaning under the 6.5. And I looked at the schedule, and you do see that there are 5 really tough games, 4 of them on the road: Duke, Notre Dame, Pitt, Miami, the Georgia Tech home game. And then those last 2 games that are home to end the season are probably the games that will determine whether or not I think they go over the 6.5. As long as they can take care of business at home against Florida State and North Carolina. Because as you know, of course, they have beaten North Carolina 4 straight times. They've beaten them 3 straight as dogs. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think they're a 7-win team?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think, I would say those first probably, 6 games are extremely critical for NC State. You have to be able to kind of set the stage. If they're able to find a way to go 5-1 in those games, at home against ECU, at home against UVA, and then going on the road against Wake Forest and Duke before coming home against Virginia Tech and then Campbell, that to me, if you're able to find a way to beat ECU, beat UVA, beat Wake Forest, who should be a team that you can win against. Now, it's always been difficult for NC State for some reason to go into Winston-Salem and win those games. But given this is a Thursday night game, given this is a game for NC State that, you didn't have too difficult of tests to start the season. Hopefully you come away with a 2-0 record from those first 2. You go into Wake Forest with a little bit of steam, a little bit of momentum, and a chance to win that game. Again, like you said, Duke is going to be the really difficult one out of those first 5 games or first 6 games for NC State. And then Virginia Tech is always going to be kind of a weird one. We'll see what Virginia Tech is capable of this year. But if they're able to find a way to go 5-1 in those first 6 games, that really sets the stage for them to get at least over that 7-win mark, or try to get to that 7-win mark, because as you mentioned, it's really backloaded in terms of difficulty for NC State. They have that last game against Notre Dame before they get their bye, before you get that real bye week for NC State. And then you go on the road to Pittsburgh before facing Georgia Tech at home, before going to Miami, and then closing out the season against Florida State and UNC. If they slide in those next 4 games after going potentially 5-1, yeah, those last 2 games are going to be really, really critical because Florida State, UNC, we don't really know what to expect from either one of them going into the season. Obviously, they both try to load up a little bit through the transfer portal. UNC lost a lot in the spring window in terms of what they had from the previous regime. And Florida State, we'll see what a guy like Thomas Castellanos is capable of. We'll see what they were able to kind of build around him in terms of the offense. But, man, they were really down last season. And I don't know that they're necessarily going to take that leap with Thomas Castellanos going into this season that they had back in 2023. So, that's going to be an interesting ending for NC State. But you've got to come away, I think, at the very least 5-1 from those first 6 games. If they're able to win against Duke, that would be huge. But you can't lose 2 of those first 6 games because then you're really setting yourself up for a difficult end to the season with those last 6 games based off of, the fact that 3 of the toughest games are on the road. And then those 3 home games are against teams that we really don't know what any of those teams are capable of in the ACC going into this year.
So what do you think? If you had a guess, make your prediction there. I don't know if I don't know when you are or if you've already made a prediction, but you think they are they're not just a 6-win bowl team, but are they a 7-win, maybe even an 8-win team this year?
Yeah, we usually make those predictions a little closer to the season. So we got like a little over 50 days still until that. But yeah, I mean, and obviously I want to see what happens through fall camp. I want to make sure there's no injuries that take place in fall camp. And, those things happened last year. Those things have happened in previous years too. And really decimated what NC State was capable of doing. But I do feel like this is a 7-win team. And
that's what I think. Yeah.
The question mark right now is that good enough? Is that good enough for what NC State wants to do, for what the NC State fan base wants to do, for what Boo Corrigan wants out of this program as well? Look, I think Dave Doran has been able to win enough games in years where he absolutely needed to stay in this position. But I don't know if 7 is going to be enough right now.
Okay. And overall, though, the fans at a gauge, are they above 50% or below 50%? Where are they confident, or are they just kind of ready to move on?
I think it's a mixed bag right now. There's a very vocal minority, and that typically happens when it comes to head coaches, and especially like you mentioned at the beginning, when a guy's been around for 13 years, that leads to some issues, and that leads to fans kind of getting to the point where they're like, all right, maybe it's best to move on, and maybe we reach our ceiling. And I think the biggest thing for Dave Doran is he hasn't gotten to an ACC championship game. You haven't gotten to a 10-win season. And, there's been reasons why. You think back, we talked about it, the 2022 season, there was a lot of hope going into that year. Devin Leary was going to be the guy. He was the guy in 2021. He broke Phillip Rivers' record, but, they had developed and they weren't at that level yet. They were going to be at that level in 2022. They came into the season top 15 in the country. Devin Leary suffers an injury midway through the season, and they're not able to do it. Very similar story last year. Grayson McCall came into the season. The expectation is he's going to be the guy. Jordan Waters is going to be the veteran running back behind him, and they're going to lead NC State to the promised land and get to the ACC championship game. Not only was it the fact that Grayson McCall didn't live up to expectations when he was on the field, then he has to medically retire from football.
Oh, yeah.
And then Jordan Waters didn't live up to expectations that you had for him last season. The defense wasn't nearly good enough for what you needed last season. That was the first time in 3 years that they have finished outside of the top 30 in overall defense under the previous regime and Tony Gibson. So right now, there's a lot of questions I think that need to be answered on the defensive side of the football before they can get to a 7 or 8 win season. Is that good enough? Is 7 wins good enough to be able to get you to next year And are you able to retain a lot of the same guys that you were able to retain this past offseason? Are you able to see development and guys kind of moving into those roles the following season? And if you're not, then there probably will be some questions on whether or not it's best to move on at that point.
All right. So, I mean, lastly, because you've been through this with Dorn for a long time, are these usually the seasons that they do well?
Yes. Yes.
That's why I set you up with that, but I kind of felt that was the case. But yeah,
true. I mean, like you go back to, God, I think back to 2016, the very end of the season. A lot of people believe the only reason why he kept that job in 2016 was based off of the fact that they won against UNC to get to a bowl game, and that certainly helped to get you to 6-6. And the fact that it's UNC and you won it on the road against a good UNC team to have Mitch Trubisky as the quarterback, and that certainly helped. But they had players like Ryan Finley, like Kelvin Harmon, like Jacoby Myers, like Jalen Samuels, and I think back to it was Bradley Chubb, Naheem Hines, BJ Hill, all those guys coming back for that following season. And then 2019 happens, and the only reason why he was kept around in 2019 was based purely off of what could be achieved in 2020. Well, last season, one of the reasons why he was kept around was because of what the potential could be for 2025. Can these guys truly lift you and get you to where you need to be? And if not, then that leads, again, like I said, to questions of whether or not it's best to continue with Dave Doeren or move on.
Yeah, that's why what you're basically saying is they need that kind of wow season that says that, there is progress here, because a 7-win season or maybe even a lackluster 8-win season without any like big wins could be looked at. What's the difference between that and 6 wins? That could be looked at that way, and I get that, but we'll see. This is why some of these teams like this you want to keep an eye on, especially coming off a disappointing year. And they have that talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball, as we talked about. So offense is going to dictate this season for NC State. And if they can keep all those guys healthy, I don't see any reason in the world why they're not going to be in every game. Just going to be a matter of whether or not the defense can come through for them. So,
yeah, I think it's going to come down to, in previous seasons, NC State could hold teams to less than 30 points on a consistent basis.
Oh, yeah.
I think this season for NC State, you're going to have to consistently score above 35 points in order to win games. Based off of where this defense is now. Do I think that could grow down the stretch? Do I think this team could get better in the back half? That's critical. But the issue is you're going to be facing the better offenses in the second half compared to where things are right now. And I think that's going to be the biggest question mark is, can this defense progress enough to be able to catch up to where the offense can be down the stretch? And can they, be symbiotic and be able to get NC State to, a potential 9-win season? That's going to be what has to take place down the stretch in order for this to actually be a 8 or 9-win season for NC State.
Well, if all goes well, I'll look forward to the opportunity to talk to you a much more condensed interview, maybe either Duke week or Notre Dame week. Something like that would be great. That meaning, of course, everything's going well and there's a lot of positive going on. I hope that's the case. I think this is a team that I'm definitely going to, right. I definitely think this is a team to keep an eye on. No question. And especially, again, not only what happened last year, as you talked about to kick off the show, not just for the football program, for the basketball program too. Very disappointing seasons for both after the build-up. So, looking forward to seeing if the Wolfpack can be one of those sleeper teams. Don't forget to check out the links in the description of this video. Once again, you can check out everything regarding the football team and much more. Following NC State and this gentleman, Cory Smith from 247 Sports, Pack Pride. And again, thanks for doing this. By the way, Cory, when is you have a show coming up? So you do this show once a week, or how many times a week do you do it?
Yeah, so we do over on our YouTube channel. We push out content throughout the week, every week. So we actually have, like, right now we're doing segments each morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we'll have segments on YouTube, usually late morning, because we shoot them in the morning. So it's actually like authentically, but we call them Coffee with Cory. So those go out. But then we also have our podcast, pregame podcast, postgame podcast, everything. So yeah, it's a full operation over there, along with the content that we put up on the site. So yeah, we try to get people where they're at. So whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on our site, whether it's on social media, I want to make sure that everybody's can take advantage of those things and be able to consume our content in any way possible.
Well, hopefully they'll enjoy a fun season while they're doing it. Again, I look forward to hopefully getting the opportunity to talk to you sometime during the season, Cory.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, Greg.
You got it.